seen that. Screenshot it, quick. You got a special peek into the abyss. Now we're gonna dive into the void, feet first. Who's gonna be able to take it? Free Marcie are the Gulch Trotters. Like we said, this is going to be the champion of the APAC region.
Jack, 24th seat.
With explosive, fortified, and quaking no less.
Big pull coming up here right away from both teams, really. Pretty much the standard pull that you see in this dungeon, but it's really scary because of all the extra fell explosives. You're looking to kill this pack as quickly as possible, obviously. That's why you see both teams pop that Bloodlust, but part of it is exacerbated by the fact that there's just so much tank damage going out with that Dark Withering cast. A lot of splash damage on the groups as well, and you want to kill this trash before it kills you because eventually the tank will die. We see Purgatory proc over on Skylar already.
And you're seeing Wrath having a huge amount of deaths here. 8 deaths already for Free Marcie as they're just kind of struggling to do this. And they have more explosives that are going to be detonating in a second here, which completely wipes out their entire team. So right off the start, Free Marcie, defending world champions, really in quite a hard spot right now.
I mean, already 12 wipes, haha, on the board from them right now. Just in the very start of this dungeon, and you know, everybody's going, well, of course, you have to kill the trash before it kills you, but I was just trying to highlight just how dangerous the trash in here is, especially in this fortified setting, and it's going to be even worse once we get past this first boss, but let's focus on that first. We did see Gulch Trotters with that good pull, finishing off the trash, and then resetting the boss, and during that reset time, they use that space to grab those little gooeys and kite them around the room. They apply a really nasty dot to the tank, but all eyes right now on Zerol. Jack, the first boss of the dungeon, has a particularly large health pool because there was a mechanic where one player, which you will see on the screen at home, they will have kind of a little phased icon, a little circular recycling icon on their nameplate. They will get sent down to their own phase, and they're responsible for killing 10 small mobs by themselves. Once they do so, they will have access to a special action button, which when they use, they will bring them up to the regular realm and will stun the boss for, I believe, 10 or 12 seconds, increasing the damage taken from the boss by 200%.
Also very important throughout this fight, there will be the Decimate that goes out onto the tank, leaving behind an expanding void zone behind it. So it's very interesting right off the bat that Skylark has just very awkward positioning into this, pulling the boss almost into the dead center of the room. So you're having that full maximum sized void puddle, you know, starting to spawn there. You always want to make sure you're keeping the tank out of that void, or sorry, the boss out of that void puddle because it does deal that extra additional damage here. But at this point, Gulch Trotters getting out of that phase so rapidly, starting the vulnerability phase, getting it all their cooldowns popped to be able to actually neutralize these. So huge damage coming out of here, and you are seeing Skylark, you know, in a pretty good position to be able to push this boss, you know, right next to the void puddles and get them a bit cleaner decimates coming out here.
Yeah, I mean, not the best use of their real estate, Jack, indeed, but nonetheless, he is below 50%. Definitely will have to rotate one more cycle on that damage taken. We're seeing them now intelligently moving it to the side of that first void zone, decimate zone that they put down. Now, we do have to note that any mob that enters this void area or any of the dark void area in the rest of this dungeon does get a buff for 100% increased damage done while they remain within it, which is why you're seeing, of course, the boss not kited through it. And if any of the goos reach this boss, there will be a detrimental explosion finishing off most of the group. Free Marcie just now pulling the boss. They unfortunately accrued an extra 2 deaths as well on their journey to do so.
Always important to watch out for those explosions, the detrimental explosions. There's not that many happy explosions here in this instance at all here. Gulch Trotters, you know, getting this all down to 30% here. Doing an excellent job being able to kind of kite the rest of these mobs just all the way back here. We are seeing Dad getting caught into a very awkward corner here where he couldn't actually run away.
Oh, that Typhoon saved them so much.
So close. Like, Dak wasn't able to run away because he'd just be running it into those mobs right there. And he wasn't able to kind of turn the boss 180. So kind of poor positioning there right as that phase gets started. But really good Typhoon to get, you know, save their bacon.
These voids, these gooeys slowly coalescing onto the boss right now, making sure that they don't reach. That Typhoon was absolutely clutch. Would have been a huge amount of damage on the group, especially on top of the fact that the healer was dead at that time. They did use that battle rest to get him up, and Zerol does fall here. You know, they could have maybe done a bit of a risky play after they saw that they stabilized there, and maybe actually not res the healer in the end, but want to play safe. Better safe than sorry. They will pull some extra trash right now while the RP with Ilaria happens, giving access to the second zone. All eyes now on Free Marcie on the right side of the screen. They're now working and just finishing up their first burn phase on Zerol, looking nice and stable on this boss and hopefully putting the rest of the kind of, you know, sloppiness at that first pull behind them.
Yeah, and while we're talking about Free Marcie, of course, being, you know, those defending world champions, it always makes me think quite a bit about last year's MDI when Seat was maybe 3 or 4 weeks old.
We don't talk about the great bloodbath of 2017, Jack.
Yeah, but it is interesting to see where, you know, at that time, Free Marcie, you know, wasn't super well practiced on that, and like you said, it was just a bloodbath. So, you know, there's got to have a lot more practice at this point, but, you know, you also can't blame them if they're not as well prepared for this as they were for the other parts of the bracket.
Right, you are, Zach. We see a good asphyxiate coming out of Breath. DK on that coalescing void near the boss there, making sure that it doesn't reach it. Gulch Trotters now moving into that kind of RP room, getting ready for Alaria to open up the direction leading into the very large open zone. They do pull some extra trash, kind of line of sighted around the corner, while we see Locust Walker there with Alaria, of course, at the bottom of the screen, getting ready to open up the gate leading to Sapphir's, the second boss. So we're all running through a lot of this area on the ground, the void, but he is fixated. It doesn't matter if he gets that temporary 100% damage increase buff, as long as he's not actually hitting anyone with it. So he is parked there during his stun, but guess what? He's stunned. So it doesn't really matter. Free Marcie do finish it off. Looks like they're recomposing themselves and will get ready to pull some extra trash on the side in a similar fashion to Gulch Trotters, who is actually just now getting access to this Sapphirish area.
No, and to first unlock Sapphirish and make him active, you do have to be dealing with 3 Rift Wardens that are spawning next to these little portals coming out here, and they are all in set locations here. So the first one, right as you're walking into this kind of courtyard area, and then the following one will be, from the camera's right side near the this kind of sunken temple off the side of the cliff here to be able to take down, and then one is going to be further up in the void in the top right-hand corner of where you're seeing the camera right now. You have to be clearing all of those out, and there's going to be tons of trash along the way, and whenever you're not in combat with one of the Rift Wardens, you will periodically have a little bit of Voidlings spawning and raining down on top of the players.
Right, you are. So the key here really is to make sure you get to that next Warden as quickly as possible to not have to deal with extra gauntlet trash, which of course adds no extra percentage to your meter, so it's just a bunch of time lost. You already see the team kind of slowly pulling this Rift Warden, making sure to interrupt those Stygian blasts, which will fear and nuke a player for 5 seconds, and they start to immediately move over to that second Rift that has spawned with the Warden there. They'll have to pull a lot of trash here, usually a pretty dangerous pull that we see players do, and they'll have to babysit, of course, those explosives in the meantime. Not as big of a pull as you would expected. Some of the tricksters do come up right now, even though it's not Halloween. There's no trick-or-treating going on, but they decide to say hello nonetheless. Skylar moves over, grabs the Warden, makes sure none of those extra Shawlings spawn on top of them for that event right now. And Free Marcie is also in this area. They're currently working at 50% on their first Warden.
Yeah, at this point, we've seen a lot of variations between how they're actually going after any of the Rift Wardens to be able to deciding which trash they want to actually end up going after here. So one of the big things you're able to see is in this dungeon that, a lot of players try to avoid on live, or always have to watch out for when you're getting into higher levels, because this is a 24. How you're going to be determining what trash you are going to be pulling, pacing yourself throughout this instance to find what you can get away with pulling here is always very important, especially when we have to be dealing with those explosives, because even if you're having some of the Voidlings spawn, those can actually be spawning some explosives, and if you're dragging all of that stuff in with you, you could still have them very far out at range. It'd be such a pain.
Especially in this dungeon, there's a lot that you want to avoid on the side of extra trash and, of course, some of the zones on the ground. The Gulch Trotters now finishing off or soon to be finishing off their second Warden. This run over to the third portal is about twice the length of the first one, so there's a good chance that they will spawn some of those GUIs, but oftentimes we see players or the tank grab a bit of extra trash on the side while one of the more mobile players, in this case either the Boomkin or even the healer, runs over and tags that Warden for the tank and drags it back before any of those extra mobs do spawn. Free Marcie have now moved over to their second Warden as well, doing a similarly large pull, and just tons of damage coming out of those 2 Windwalkers, Jack.
Yeah, that's what you really want to be able to see is, being able to neutralize those Rift Wardens, having that strong single target damage, rapidly being able to take care of it. And like you said, for Gulch Trotter, Skylark is, pulling a little bit of that extra trash. They are finding the Trickster before it finds, one of the healers or one of the more squishy players in the group there. And they have to deal with that Voidling pack before they do end up engaging with the Rift Warden. So they already have that taken care of. As you see in the quick Sky Step going out to pull that Rift Warden and be able to pull it down. Because like you mentioned, there are a lot of patrols going around that portal, and just because the Rift Warden's spawning from that portal, there's nothing forcing you to actually stay there and be in combat with it. Yeah,
I mean, once he spawns there, you can grab it and pull it anywhere you want in the instant. Stygian Blast getting interrupted there by Gulch Trotters, making sure to kill all of those extra explosives that are spawning. Free Marcie now as well heading over to that third Warden. So in terms of raw dungeon progression, they're actually really not that behind. They've actually managed to catch up a bit, only 3% behind on trash and pulling the same Warden here. So really good performance coming out of Free Marcie, but they have a huge mountain to overcome right now with that 13 death difference between the two teams, 65 seconds on the board. So it's going to take more more than just a few seconds saved here and there.
Yeah, it really will, and I think a lot of that will kind of come down to as we go into Viceroy's room. We've seen a lot of variance with, how our championship teams really have been approaching this, how safely they want to play, how much time do they want to dedicate to it, and it really starts going into the most lethal trash of this instance. It becomes so much more harder to deal with whenever you're kind of combining into these pulls, and especially when you're not able to have, a little bit of avoidance or leech, little things like that, and those tertiaries can definitely make a huge impact from the live to actually now.
I mean, Free Marcy killing their third Warden at almost the exact same time as Gulch Trotters. Just so much more damage coming out of the Free Marcy squad. They are 8% behind on trash, but are closing a lot of that progression gap very rapidly. Going to see a fairly sizable pull coming out of both teams here, right in front of Saprish, who of course now has spawned as 3 Wardens have been killed. Now, a lot of danger with this trash, not only for the amount of damage that goes out on the tank and the debuffs on the group who see that solar beam come down, but also it forces you to constantly displace around while these explosives orbs are spawning, keeping players on their toes to make sure that they babysit those and don't let anything get too out of hand.
Yeah, and we've seen a number of times as well with how much void zones are spawning on the ground. You're seeing a number of these little traps that are going down, which will of course stun the players that are caught in between it. A lot of times you have to be kind of leaning on some of your ranged DPS here to be able to help you out a lot of times with the explosive orbs. And Gulch Trotters has done an excellent job being able to deal with this in very, very good order. Leaning on, Dag a lot of times being able to actually take care of a lot of them. But even then, you're seeing Chompy actually dedicating a little bit of his time in case some of things are too far out of range here. And it's making sure that even though Skylark has actually procced his Purgatory through some of those pulls, he's not putting himself in unnecessarily dangerous positions in order to kind of compromise the raid. And they're also doing a great job getting those tricksters out.
Yeah, I mean, they're grabbing just a few of the extra GUIs on the side, the Trickster as well. They want to make sure this entire area is as clean as possible leading up to Saprish. Reason being that Saprish, you have to move around a lot because the traps we just talked about is trash. On the trash, Saprish really just cranks up to 100% on the fight, constantly putting them down. Skylar's just getting so low, barely hanging on there by a thread. We already saw that Purg proc earlier, so, I mean, he's not going to have anything to save him. He goes down, and we just mentioned these Void Discharges are really just, they seem like insignificant mobs, but that dot that they apply to the tank is so brutal, especially in this fortified setting, and you only have access to that Dispel as a healer every 8 seconds, so you will eventually have to eat a bunch of that damage unless you're kiting them around. But now they are getting ready to pull Saprish and his 2 pets.
Also important to note, Gulch Trotters and Free Marcy kind of engaging at almost the exact same time here. So there still is going to be that 65-second differential for the deaths that they're still giving Gulch Trotters that advantage here. But with a boss like Saprish, and again, going back to all those void zones, all the traps that you have to watch out for, you will have to, of course, make sure you're having regular interrupts going out onto Shadewing, and as well as just constantly moving around to, dodge through the Dark Fang. A lot of this, is anybody's game still going into this boss.
I mean, the reason that you're seeing the teams stack up here, at least on the part of Gulch Trotters, is that Dark Fang will actually jump to one of the distant players when he does that. By being near the melee, you make sure that the cat spawns near all of the other players in a very perfect fashion, and as a result, you get increased cleave damage as they do share a health pool on the cat, on, of course, Shadewing, that little spell for fell bad. I can never know what it actually is.
Skyfin.
Skyfin, thank you. You did look it up. I thank you very much for that. I'm not giving you the $5 though. Aww. And Saprish himself, as you get a lot of that cleave damage, want to make sure to jump out of those traps as quickly as possible. They do armor really quickly, like a second and a half, 2 seconds, and they'll stun if you're caught in them. So really well positioned here by Gulch Trotters. And Free Marcy, not very, and in fact, they're actually ahead. They're 5% ahead on the boss. So both teams doing an exceptional job right now. Yeah,
and it's always important to be able to watch, the extra benefits you're getting out of, like, say, the Warlock being able to have that multi-dot, the huge damage that he is able to pump out. But also at the same time, whenever, while you are, of course, having to have a little bit of awkward positioning, you're having to kind of drag everything where you're letting the Warlock and the rest of the Druid kind of set the tone for where Dark Fang is going to end up going here. It is extremely beneficial when you're able to let your casters have a lot more time and opportunity to be free casting here. Chompy, of course, being able to take advantage of staying in his own Starfall to be able to have those free casts going out, which is so convenient for how much mobility is required for this. Because you could, as you're seeing, you're barely getting a cast up before more traps are coming down. Dark Fang spawns on you, and the frontal cone you have to be dodging through. So many things going on in great plays here.
Yeah, I mean, that frontal cone can be an absolute catastrophe if it ends up clipping any of the players there. Definitely don't want any extra deaths. But I mean, Free Marcy just pulling further and further ahead. We were talking last time that there was only 5% difference between the two teams. Now it's up to 12%. Free Marcy downing. They're really trying as hard as they can to overcome the mountain that they have in front of them, not only with the 65 seconds between the two teams in terms of death, but also the extra 16% trash between the two teams. Expecting to see a pretty substantial pull on trash here out of Free Marcy. Jack, we do know what a struggle angle it is coming up with the trash leading up to Locust Walker.
Well, and like
or
you
not
said,
Locust Walker, excuse me, Viceroy.
Yeah, and like you said, you know, they do have a huge amount of trash to be making up as they enter Viceroy's room, which has some notoriously difficult trash to be able to kind of deal with here. So, you know, as you're seeing it, Free Marcie is, of course, just running through, dragging all the little gooeys onto that right side there, being able to kind of get a safer position here. And you'll probably see both teams kind of going into something similar where they grab the gooeys, they run right up the gut, right up the middle here. And it's so important to make sure you're staying in that kind of straight line, because even straying off just a little bit, it makes it so easy to pull some of the other casters on either side of the road.
Yeah, certainly these gooeys are rich and chewy, very dangerous, but you don't want to put them in your mouth, Jack. I can tell you that out of experience. Free Marcie moving over on the side here. Now, we did mention earlier that any mobs that are in that void on the side do get 100% increased damage, so it's particularly important that you don't get too many dots applied to the tank. We do have a death go over for the Demon Hunter over on Gulch Trotters, adding an extra 5 seconds to the board. And, they unfortunately get the res interrupt. Did he get it off? No, he didn't. So they get the res interrupted by the quaking, unfortunately. So they do end up using the pylon instead. We can already see that Shadow Weaver, the most dangerous mob of this entire area, except for the boss, of course, patrolling around in that circular clockwise fashion. That is the mob to look out for in this trash, especially in the Fortified setting. Probably not something at the 24 level that you're often going to want to combine with another trash pack. Yeah,
and at this point, they're just taking their time. They're getting some of the gooeys onto the edge there. They got to watch out for the explosives that are just right behind them. Great moves by Dag to make sure, great awareness there to make sure he's able to keep an eye on those explosives running out, not inconveniencing the other DPS that they have to split off. Of course, there are other targets here, and that's what you want to be able to have as a healer. Being able to put yourself in that position where you're not, you're able to kind of make up for a lot of the times where other DPS want to be able to actually continue taking down these mobs, and you're able to kind of make up a lot of time for them instead.
Techniques unfortunately slithers into another death, number 3 on the board for them. They don't, they actually do have access to that battle res. Intelligently opting not to use it. The trash is almost dead here, regardless of the fact that there is a huge amount of damage coming out of it right now, but they do manage to stabilize, finish off the rest of it. They will now res Technique. Hopefully not too much time delayed with it quaking, unfortunately spawning on top of them, but this should be all right. Free Marcie now working on the dangerous mobs that we were talking about as Gulch Trotters is rearing up to pull the same pack.
Yeah, and they actually had quaking coming up right as they were having to deal with the Shadow Weaver here, so kind of an awkward position. They just opted to use the pylon, the failure detection pylon there to keep them up. You're seeing Shape immediately going down here. They are opting to use that battle res. They do need to make sure that they're keeping him up to be able to deal with these Shadow Weavers, so they're going to need all the damage they possibly can get as they're kind of standing in this open field here to not only kill the explosives, the one looks like it's about to be going off here, dealing a ton of damage, but you're also going to be having, of course, that dark matter that comes out, which would be the ultimate explosive orb that will just completely wipe out your group if you're not killing it quick enough.
So over there on Free Marcie, we do see that there's a death going down. They opt not to use one of their 2 battle reses as the Grand Shadow Weaver was quite low on HP already, and they did well to line of sight that dark matter explosion. Every bit matters on that one. Gulch Trotters having another death and not having access to their battle res, as we just saw it earlier used on that Demon Hunter, do manage to down the pack, fortunately for them, and will be resing Techniques in just a moment again. They're starting to close that gap on the death difference. But 50 seconds now down from the 65-70 we were talking about earlier, managing to slowly claw their way back. And it seems Gulch Trotter had a bit perhaps of a miscalculation on their trash percentage. They've already completed their 100% and still have more to go, so a bit of time lost there, whilst Free Marcie at 87% now and going up on the right side of the screen, opting to likely finish some of that remaining trash while the RP happens after they manage to kill the third boss, if they manage to kill it. Another death from Techniques now.
Yeah, and these are the things that are really starting to make Gulch Trotter's lead just kind of slip through their grasp here. As that used to be 65-second death differential is kind of going steadily down over to about
re-increasing.
But re-increasing there. So you are having another death going out for Free Marcie there. But at this point, they are looking to be in very strong position to be able to get back in, pull the boss here very quickly. Chompy doing well to be able to jump into bear form, hit his frenzy regen, make sure he's staying alive, of course, from that vacuum that's being drawn in. Deals so much damage, and again, puts more and more pressure on your healer to be killing those explosive orbs, to be able to keep healing any of the people that are getting those suppressions. It's so important.
So, definitely a bit of an advantage here for Free Marcie heading into this boss and Allura later when we get to it, having access to those 2 battle reses. None to speak for Gulch Trotters, but they will have access to one in about a minute or so based on that timer. We do know it is a 10-minute CD, or recharge time rather. Viceroy being pulled on both sides. Free Marcie having the advantage with the earlier pull with 8 to 9% ahead of the team. Now, death coming over on Free Marcie. Fortunately, as we just said, they do have access to those battle reses. Immediately get one up on that first windmill Skinwalker Monk, and they come up. Now, both teams have a multi-daughter, which is quite effective at dealing with the tentacles that spawn in this boss. The boss does spawn 3 tentacles randomly around the room. You could have a bit of luck with a bunch of them spawning in a clump. Want to make sure you interrupt that Dark Blast and get him over to those tentacles so that the melee can help Cleave, but he also could have horrible luck and have all of them spawn in a huge equilateral triangle around the room, and then you have your multi-daughters having to do a lot of work there, Jack.
Yeah, and it is always very important to be able to kind of get everything as closely grouped together as possible. You are, of course, seeing, you know, that kind of single target Dark Blast that Viceroy will periodically be casting there, you know, where you still need to actually get that interrupted in order to move your boss over, so you're still able to get that effective Cleave here. So pretty good positioning there by Gulch Trotters, getting all the tentacles within pretty close range, being able to kill, of course, the caster ads that are shielding the boss, and then, of course, being able to have that interrupt onto that single target, or the AoE nuke onto the entire group.
Gulch Trotters really kind of minimizing the gap between the boss difference. In fact, it's dead even for both teams right now at 59-60% apiece. Free Marcy, you know, struggling a bit with some of the tentacle damage coming in. Not the best spawns for them, but managing to stay afloat. They do have access to 2 battle reses now as that CD comes up, and 1 for Gulch Trotters. There are a couple more casts that we have to talk about. Of course, there is the Howling Terror, which will fear all players for 5 seconds. It does come up only every 15 to 17 seconds, so as long as one melee or the tank are watching it at all times, it should be fine for them. And the Eternal Twilight, which at 100% energy, the boss will spawn 2 extra ethereals that come in. The DK will grip one to the other to make sure you maximize Cleave, and you have 10 seconds to kill them. Otherwise, we're seeing it right here, otherwise the boss will get that Eternal Twilight cast off, which will kill the entire party.
Yeah, and that point, it's really scary for the healers, because you have to make sure that all your DPS is focusing on those caster ads, so you're able to interrupt the Eternal Twilight. So at that point, the damage priority goes from the tentacles onto the caster ads, and you kind of just have to leave those tentacles up, regardless of what health they're at, regardless of, you know, what percent or who they're actually casting on. So at that point, it becomes, you know, you still want to be able to dish out that damage onto them, but you really need to make sure you're kind of focusing on top of the healers. And you're seeing Chompy here, or at one point taking 2 of the tentacles and having to just go in a bear form in order to survive that stuff. So tremendous pressure can be on your healers as you're going into this, and it's always important. You're seeing Chompy dropping really, really low there, but really good moves to be able to make sure he survives.
Yeah, I mean, it does have 5 stack from that debuff that does diminish and go away. Now, the boss is in the middle of the room for this pushback right now, similar to Dressrons, but it does not affect you whether you're closer or further from the boss in terms of the rate that he pushes you. He starts to push you slowly, and by the end of it, ramps up rapidly, and if you get pushed to the outside in that purple goop, you will take a bunch of damage, so you want to make sure you start as close to the boss as possible and ramp up your movement abilities, your speed increasing abilities towards the end of his channel. Both teams doing really well there in that regard. Free Marcy starting to pull slightly ahead, but really these teams have been quite neck and neck on this boss. Advantage to Gulch Trotters though, because they did start the boss about 8 to 9% behind and managed to catch up and now stabilize.
They've definitely done an excellent job, especially because they just now get that battle res back to be able to use on shape that last 10%. So it's great that they have that back, you know, because that was one of the things going into this boss fight we were kind of worried about, that they didn't have access to it. But you're having the full cast going into Chompy. He's dropping so low here. Really need to be able to get him topped off. So great moves there by Dag to kind of sustain him, get him in a comfortable enough position here, and make sure that they're able to kind of, you know, get the pressure off with those tentacles there as they're burning the last couple % on Viceroy here.
I mean, those tentacles just taking a huge chomp out of the Druid, managing to finish off Viceroy as well. Gulch Trotters now waiting. As Chompy does go down, fortunately,
that tentacle wasn't done with him.
He wanted to make sure if they go down, they're taking Chompy with them. Chompy will get res now as they wait for the RP to happen for Ilaria. Free Marcy pulling the last 10% of their trash efficiently during this RP. Really not much for you to do. Gulch Trotters already finishing with their trash a while ago. Actually, too much trash. We already saw their 100% reached before they finished the last pack. Nonetheless, both teams waiting here, and we have a 45-second death difference between the two teams.
Yeah, and as they're waiting for this RP going out, you know, this is what I always kind of refer to as the nice time. You're able to get everybody rezzed up. You're able to kind of get everybody in that good position here, and they will still have a couple extra %. So you're seeing Free Marcy here having, you know, that perfect trash percentage, but Gulch Trotters really wasn't punished for pulling as much trash as they did here. You know, even with those deaths that are going out on the Free Marcy side, you know, they still are having a very large 45-second differential, that advantage going into for Gulch Trotters right now.
Yeah, there's a double Rift Warden pull in here. The exact same mobs as we saw earlier in the Saprish area, making sure to interrupt their Stygian Blast. The only difference here is that as long as they stay alive, those 2 portals on the side are alive too, and they will constantly spawn these small lashing voidlings that are coming out, just doing minor damage to the player. A bit of a pain in the butt for for the tank to pick up if players are kind of DPSing them before they get anywhere near the tank. So that's why everyone's staying nice and central in this room, doing well to pick everything up. Free Marcie will be finishing the last of their percent with those 2 Rift Wardens, while Gulch Trotter already being done. Once these mobs are killed, I believe both teams have already done the whole reset boss thing, so they'll have access to and have now skipped the RP for Lura, and will be ready to pull the boss right away.
Yeah, and it's important to always, I'm not sure if they did end up doing the reset on it, but it's always possible if you're pulling any of these Rift Wardens into kind of the stage that you're seeing Lura on in the background. As you pull the Rift Wardens up, you actually are able to quickly kind of reset the boss there, which is quite a bit faster than waiting, like you said, on that RP. I'm not sure. I don't think either team ended up doing it, but at that point, it still will kind of equal footing as they're going into this boss, and it really will be about how cleanly Gulch Trotters is going to be able to play here.
Yeah, I mean, certainly don't want to be allured into the wrong information for any of these two teams, but it's not, it is about how cleanly the two teams will do it, of course. This is a long boss, a lot of danger coming out, and it's going to be really important to see how much burst these two teams output on this boss, which has a similar mechanic to, as we call the first boss, where for 10 seconds at a time, she will take 200% increased damage, and then whatever you can do with that is great, and anything left over after that with her massive health pool just turns into a huge race against the soft and rage clock. But starting off here, she will gain her shield about 1 global cooldown into the cast of the players, after which a greater Rift Warden will spawn, and empowered versions of the one we saw. With a couple new abilities, he does spawn the 3 smaller adds. These small adds actually leave a void zone on the ground, but importantly here, Jack, as well, a mechanic that's very new for players this expansion. There will be an Armageddon style mechanic that they need to soak, or else the group will get nuked.
Yeah, and you will see it kind of come down, like it looks like a dark crash that will be coming out on the group, and having just a little purple swizzle coming out of that little circle there, making sure, once you stand in it, the swizzle kind of goes away, making sure it's going to be safe to be soaking.
I mean, for swizzle, my shizzle. But now they are moving on to the first DPS phase on Lura, 200% increased damage taking, getting ready on her. Everybody's pre-casting, getting all the damage they can in, and here we go. Lura starting to chunk down as they get that 200% increased damage. Free Marcie has already moved on to their second phase with 2 greater Rift Wardens. As we can see, they pop the Bloodlust for that first burn phase, which then carries over into those 2 Rift Wardens, while Gulch Trotters actually opted to hang on to theirs.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see, if Gulch Trotters actually is going to be using their Bloodlust here at this point, because it's always very awkward, depending on how quickly you do end up killing these Rift Wardens. If you do use your Bloodlust on the first backlash there, it actually transitions really nicely into those 2 Rift Wardens, because you are still having that duration up here. As you're seeing, the little swizzles going away, as you're seeing Shape and, of course, Dag taking care of those Armageddon-type mechanics. Just pop and bubble to make sure that you're able to, not take too much damage going out onto that. But they are taking them down in short order here. But it does look like they're going to have, like we were talking about, just a little bit of runoff to be able to, of their lust, about 10 seconds or so going out there that they kind of have to be dealing with. So that's why I always like being able to see the teams use it at least for part of the backlash, and then carrying over immediately into, of course, the double Rift Warden.
I mean, it's a pretty big dizzle for both teams right now to make sure that they get as much damage as they can on Lura. Huge damage coming out of Free Marcie as they finish their second burn phase, finishing Lura down to 28%. I don't think Gulch Trotter is going to be able to approach that amount of damage. Their Bloodlust is already down. Their second burn phase comes up, and Lura comes out of her second burn phase at 60% compared to Free Marcie's 28. Just for those at home, because of the mechanics for the increased damage taken, Lura has a massive health pool at this level of dungeon. We're talking well over 1 billion. It's going to take ages for these players to deal with the rest of this fight. Nothing too mechanically difficult about the rest of this fight. The players will really just bounce back left and right across the stage to make sure that those void zones that constantly displace, as we saw on Gulch Trotter's left side of the screen there, don't clip any of them. But there is an increasing AoE aura of damage as she gets increasing damage as the fight goes on longer. So it's going to be really tough for Gulch Trotters for the last few percent. But for Free Marcie, I mean, they just did so much damage. They should be able to finish it off quickly. And after that, there was only 45 seconds for Gulch Trotters to finish her up.
And at this point, it's going to be about 40% when Free Marcie is getting really close to actually bringing it down here. So Gulch Trotters is going to be racing themselves against the clock here. And I think in many ways, they are kind of punished for not having that Bloodlust onto that first backlash phase there.
Yeah, I mean, just the multipliers with that 200% damage taken versus, the Bloodlust on top of it. Free Marcie now running out to finish the last 1% of trash that they have. So a bit of a miscalculation there, and a lot of the advantage that they would have gotten from finishing the dungeon now and probably winning because of Lura's massive health pool has gone down. They find the first ooey gooey rich and chewy that they can find, grab it immediately, death grip it in, and they're just racing to DPS it down as quickly as possible to make sure that they finish the dungeon off. 17 deaths on the board for them. As soon as that gooey finishes off, which is right now, 45 seconds left on the clock for Gulch Trotters to finish Lura.
26% left on the boss for Gulch Trotters right now. They need to be able to pour on as much damage as they can. But as you were saying, when you're having that damage ramping up higher and higher, it puts so much extra pressure on the team. And on the healer especially, to make sure you're kind of keeping everybody topped off here and playing in that safe position. So at this point, 20% left as they have exactly 20 seconds to go here. It's going to be such a huge wall for them to climb. They're going to need basically second bloodlust.
I mean, Lura sing her alluring song, tempting all the players into their deaths coming up. 17% on Lura right now, and it looks like they will not be able to clutch the rest of this as the timer runs out 2-1, and we do actually have a win in favor of Free Marcie on the first map. And honestly, based on the beginning of this dungeon, I really did not expect to see that. I mean, they had 14 deaths right off the bat before they even engaged the call.
And 17 deaths total. Like, it's so, like, from a lot of the NA games we've been seeing today, you know, a lot of times when they have that early death, they're having those early wipes, it really sets them back such a far way. But Free Marcie really buckled down and really pulled through with this game.
Absolutely insane to see a team that right out of the gates, as you guys said, 13 or 14 deaths, a huge deficit, a huge thing that they ultimately need to overcome, and they're able to take down this dungeon and get a really big start here into this series to determine who the best team in the region is going to be. And, you know, honestly, this dungeon, even after all this time, back at the MDI, and it's clear that time is just a flat circle. It's still a very difficult dungeon.
I mean, this dungeon is just a powerhouse. There's just so much dangerous trash. No matter how much players have practiced it, there's just too many factors going out with a lot of the danger in the fortified packs leading up to Viceroy, and even just the Rift Wardens. It's just, and the bosses themselves, it's not tyrannical, but I mean, look at the difficulty of just Lura, how long it takes to DPS her down, the danger of Zukal too. I mean, it's a nightmare, this dungeon.
It's like one of those questions too that you can bring up, like, oh, how much are teams really going to practice this one? Because in all actuality, if they already make it to this stage, how important is it going to be? Regardless of that, it's just a difficult dungeon. That is something that needs to be expressed, especially when we do get here, and the key difficulty is where it's at. But I got to bring up that's applied mathematics for you. Math really going to matter. That slight miscalculation was almost the other, besides the 13 or 14 deaths that come in, it's almost that little sliver of troublematic numbers that almost come to bite Free Marcie there, but ultimately they are going to come out on top, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, 30-second difference, give or take, to be able to run out of Lura's room, grab one of the ooey gooeys, actually end up killing it, and it was just such a huge... I don't even know how you kind of get to that point as you're kind of approaching it and you're seeing like, oh, okay, we have the Rift Wardens here. We know how much they're going to be worth because we've killed 3 of them already, and then we have to be going through. So they almost kind of threw it at that point, but they, you know, if they didn't, they'd be almost, you know, a minute ahead.
Oh, man. With that one, towards the end there, I was just actually making the same game as Laura was making in-game as you were watching the results come in. But ultimately, that is going to be a lead for our reigning world champions. When we return, are they going to be able to do it in a 2-0? Are we going to go the distance? Either way, we are going to decide it tonight. Who is the #1 team in APAC? Folks, welcome back. We are currently in the last series of the day, and the reigning world champions have taken the lead. Today, we're going to determine who the reigning champ is going to be for APAC. Both of these squads have already qualified for that first LAN that has ever happened in MDI history. Then tomorrow, we jump in and we determine the rest of the teams for the NA region. My name is Rich, and I am going to be your host. And joining me on the desk, we got Snoot and we got Jack. And guys, it's just come to my attention what the dungeon is going to be.
What's that?
We're getting right to the thick of it, and my goodness. It's going to be Sanguine as the affix, and this is going to be a very, very tough dungeon, I think, for these guys. Not necessarily because of the fact that it is Darkheart or because it is Sanguine, but just because of how high that affix really is going to be.
Yeah, at the 24, you know, we were talking with Sours earlier when we were forced to start with Darkheart Thicket with the free pumps Gulch Trotters series. I mean, we just have so much danger coming in with the Tyrannical 24, and it's not just Shade of Xavius. I mean, he does have a lot of one-shot potential, but we saw a few deaths go out on Oakheart as well, and it's really easy to kind of just spin out of control with Dresser on too.
It really is, and a lot of times you are seeing, you know, the kind of the ramp up in damage that goes out for the teams there. I think Dresron in many ways is kind of the most healing intensive, where Xavius kind of puts more and more pressure on how prepared you are going into the boss fight. You know, what kind of other defensive tools are you really taking advantage of? Things like, you know, Ishkar's Fell Shield emitter, or a lot of the, you know, personal tank type trinkets to be able to make sure you're surviving a lot of the damage going into that fight. But Dresron, you know, can just be so lethal because, you know, when you're trying to pull more and more whelps, you're trying to get all the extra melee, you know, not being breathed on all over the place and actually baiting out the cave-ins. It's a lot of stress on the entire party there, and that's a lot of times where we see a lot of early deaths where we're missing battle reses and they actually have to burn down the last, you know, 15-20% or something like that on Tyrannical on a high key level just by themselves, and it wastes a ton of time.
Now with some of the dangers in our mind, I hope that is enough for you guys to be prepared, because we're jumping into it. Is Free Marcy going to be able to close it out here, or will it be extended? A lot on the line here. Both of these squads, the representatives for the APAC region at the first LAN. But who is going to take that prize pool and who is going to get the favorable seed? I
mean, Jack, we've already kind of, you know, in favor of Gulch Trotters here, they've already had their warm-up, and this is why, part of the reason probably why they're picking this map here. We've seen them perform it. We've seen them perform it really well in the free pump series. We're also the fact that they lost, but it was a really, really close loss too. Similar pull coming up here right away, grabbing those two ruiners before they patrol too far away. The cats, the birds, the bears, and the bees as well. There's actually no bees, but there is a bear. They're making sure that they kill this entire zoo. No BM hunters present right now.
Well, thankfully there's no bees. You know, I wouldn't be ready for that kind of conversation just yet. But going into it, you know, both you're seeing Gulch Trotters taking advantage of the bloodlust there and making sure they're able to annihilate, you know, all the entire plethora of animals going on over here. With Free Marcy just choosing to hold on to it, choosing to bank it for later. Both teams are doing a pretty good job, you know, avoiding a lot of the extra deaths that you see can be so common here. Just one on the board for Free Marcy. I believe it was a race going down. We are seeing one more. Make that two onto Retro Fresh here as well.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of space in this hallway. You know, you do have to kite these mobs away from the Sanguini, Panini, Zucchini as well. You don't want to get that extra healing in on the mobs. So Free Marcy starting to do that now with the bear. That it does have a pretty dangerous off GCD frontal cleave. I believe it's a shadow cleave, if I'm not mistaken. You want to make sure you don't point that into the healers, the ranged, or of course the melee as you backwards kite. Big punt coming over there from Chompy, and a huge damage going in. Shape DH does fall down, and an explosive goes down as well. And we have almost a full team wipe going out. Technique surviving at 2% health, and of course the DK, the blood DK, is still alive.
Skylark's just running for his very life here, making sure he's kind of staying away as Tech is trying to get himself topped off. Free Marcy here, also with 3 deaths here. Tech does go down, so it's 3 deaths on the side of Free Marcy here, and I believe it's going to be 4 as well for Gulch Trotters coming in.
That would be 4, because 4 comes after 3. That's right. That's excellent deduction.
Thanks,
for you, Jack. So Gulch Trotter does have their 4th death on the board. Really sloppy pull coming out of both of these teams early on, and a lot of it was attributed to some of the explosive orbs going off, especially for Gulch Trotter's side there. We see Chompy run up right away, stealth in kitty form, making sure that he gets right up close to that wall and starts the RP for Gladealis past these 2 menacing bears.
Yeah, maybe they were relatives. And you're seeing Chompy, of course, just being able to start that RP here as Free Marcy is just kind of pushing their way up towards the Gladealis as well here. And it's always very important to make sure you're kind of watching the approach here, and also watching the different types of mobs that can be spawning here, because you do really have very limited time to be able to get the dispel out for those poisoners that are coming over here. You are seeing Dag just having the quick res. They do have to actually face tank one of those explosive orbs there, but they are getting the rest of the team up with them, and they are getting themselves all set and ready for Gladealis.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why Techniques had to die there. Perhaps just just accidentally got an aggro with the bears, but nonetheless, luckily does not spread the rest of that aggro to the pack. Free Marcy running over as well right now, while Xerath also went kitty form to start that RP, and they're getting ready right meow to pull the rest of those groups too. Now, Gladealis already being pulled over for Gulch Trotters, doing well to already get him in the corner to minimize the amount of primal rampage that the bear will get off, immediately hitting that wall, stopping his shapeshift, and then resuming his cat jumps right out to Deg. That is very well dealing with those claws out kitty.
Yeah, I really like what they were seeing there, where Chompy was actually taking the first of the leaps there, so that Dag could actually just sit there and put in a huge amount of damage onto the pole here, taking advantage, of course, of his burst damage that was possible. And you're also seeing, he's able to take advantage of just the external cooldowns, like Ishkar's Fell Shield emitter, having a very large shield to kind of block out a lot of the damage that comes, of course, from the leap that goes onto you. Always important to note that you leap onto you, deal quite a bit of damage, and put a nasty bleed on you that you need. It basically functions exactly like Grievous, where you just need to be able to top yourself off in order to remove the debuff. And at this point, it's really just staying on your toes, and whenever you're seeing any of the nightmares coming down from the sky, that you're kind of sidestepping them, not taking that extra damage there, and then you're able to quickly top yourself off before the dot actually has an impact.
Yeah, the spooge that they leave on the ground actually immediately tanks as they're falling from the sky, and it takes every half second for a fair bit of damage, especially in this Tyrannical setting. So players kind of almost have to be pre-moving when they're spawning. We already see Chompy go down 57% of the health, down to 43 there, just from one tick of that goo as he's already moving. So just to kind of illustrate just how dangerous it is, 6 deaths on the menu for on the board rather for Gulch Trotters. Sorry, I guess I'm getting hungry, and 4 for Free Marcy, as they're just now getting ready to pull Gladealis as well. Free Marcy only 3% ahead on trash and substantially behind progression on the boss, but they are having access now to their Bloodlust that Gulch Trotter opted to use earlier on the very first trash pull.
Yep, and you see Dag doing an excellent job being able to get his judgments out right before every single jump. You are getting, of course, with your artifact weapon, a little bit of extra damage reduction that goes a very long way when you're needing basically one global to be able to top yourself off and remove the nasty bleed that's going out onto you. Paladins and Rested Druids, for that matter, are very great options to be able to deal with these nasty bleeds. Paladin, of course, covered in plate, whereas the Rested Druid can just hop into bear form every single time and either using Frenzy Regen or just kind of sitting on their hots to be able to get themselves topped off very rapidly here. So a lot of times you will see that kind of going on to the healers, and I like being able to see the wings coming out here just to make sure that they're going to be able to quickly and easily top themselves off. There was a great precasted flash to be able to hit right as he gets jumped on, and then quickly following it up with a Holy Shock to make sure that he stays topped off there.
Yeah, Deg's certainly consuming one of those Red Bulls, getting his wings up right away as he stands outside, making sure he's the furthest member away from Gladealis, doesn't want any other member, especially unprepared, such as Chompy, getting too much damage on them from the Grievous. We do have a death go down on one of the Windwalkers on Free Marcy side. They don't have access to the battle res. Fortunately / unfortunately, fortunately in the sense that it was after their entirety of CDs and Bloodlust was consumed. Unfortunately, because we're talking about a 24 Tyrannical boss that they're going to have to 4-man 50% HP on. That's a huge time dump for them, and it's going to be a huge lead that Gulch Trotters is going to get out of this as they already start to move towards the trash leading up to Oakheart.
Yeah, that's a yikes for me, man, as they do have to just take so much time and, of course, deal with the entire room being filled up with nightmares for another, maybe minute and a half to 2 minutes here, which can be such a pain to deal with on such a high key, and also just having the consistency, being able to have the consistent positioning, making sure, even when you're having the leaps going out there, actually just one-shotting times two, really. It is, and it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to be able to actually take this boss down when they only are having the Warlock available to them, and the rest of Druid just has to be sitting back and playing patient the rest of the fight.
Yeah, that's looking rough for them right now. It's a tough call right now. I'm sure what's going on in their voice comms. What's more efficient at this point? Do we just wipe, get our 2 DPS back and start at 100 without the Bloodlust and without access to a lot of our CDs, or do we just kind of bite the bullet and deal with the remaining quarter health on the boss with only 1 DPS alive really in the tank, and whatever the Druid can do in the meantime with some Wraths as well, and maintaining that Moonfire, Sunfire. But we'll have to see. It looks like they're opting to just try and finish it off. Gulch Trotters already well moving over to that Garden of Doom behind that hut, pulling all these flowers together. Yeah,
at this point, a lot of times you are seeing how easily people are going to be able to deal with a lot of the trash packs going over here. Trying to dodge the keepers whenever possible. They do really have to watch out for, of course, any of the explosive orbs coming out. Chip Skylark getting his shiny teeth knocked out of him as that Purgatory does end up proccing here. So very, very important to make sure they're either hard committing to taking care of those explosives, or they're going to be moving around to line of sight.
Yeah, so those explosives do have to be babysat right now. It's a bit tough to line of sight where they are right now. That that tree trunk is quite thick, so they have to run all the way around it just to line of sight, but it spawns in the middle there. They really wanted to play the line of sight game. They should have pulled it towards the house where they can just kind of dip in and out of the entrance there. But nonetheless, no death going on the board for them, and they will be getting ready here in just a moment to pull the keepers off to the side as they finish that Dryad cousin of the Wetad.
Yeah, no chip dip like you were talking about here. Does look like they're running over to just allow the paladin to be able to, of course, run past a lot of these keepers here. And then they're, of course, when they're pulling the keepers, again, the flowers are not coming along with them, so it's always very important to be able to grab those. Only the keepers, so the keepers will be dropping those mushrooms and be healing a lot of those blossoms as well. So he just drops his bubble down, and he's able to actually run ahead past where the keeper's original spawn point is, get ahead, drop his pylon, and then he'll be able to actually just res himself and move forward here.
Free Marcy killing off Gladalis and clutching that first checkpoint as the two Windwalkers blossom and grow out of the ground, out of their dead state, getting ready to pull a lot of the blossoms. Now, on the side, and the house pull that we just saw earlier, Dag does go down. Was it?
It was the reset.
It was the reset, indeed. So Dag is still remaining dead. Now, these flowers, not too much damage on the tank, nothing too hard for them to handle. You really have access to that consumption if really needed, but there should be no extra splash damage on the group from these blossoms unless they get caught in that ground effect. Pretty easy to move out of if you keep your eyeballs open in this. They do go down in here and are getting ready to res Dag in just a moment.
And it's important to make sure that not only are they keeping their eyeballs open, but their monitors turn on here. Dag is, of course, taking advantage of his the failure detection pylon. He wasn't actually able to get the res off until they ended up dropping combat. That's why he was away for such a long time. So he's getting back with the group, and as they're going in and pulling, as you were saying, your nice ooey gooey friends.
Yeah, the Dwellers here, particularly dangerous mobs. We do see the AoE grip come in right away, so they won't have access to that as an interrupt. And the reason you want the interrupt on these mobs, we see the beam go down, such a powerful tool healer, is that once they get the Tormented Eye casting on players, the Tormenting Eye, it will start to deal a significant amount of damage as a dot, and if the channel completes, it will nuke the player for a fear as well. So you want to make sure to interrupt them immediately.
Yeah, and all they really required was going to be, of course, that the solar beam coming down there by Chompy. At this point, you're going to see everyone probably staying pretty close in together to be able to make sure that all the roots are going to be in very close position, making it a lot easier for Dag, of course, to be able to get all of them cleared off with his Hand of Freedom here.
We do see a huge stomp coming on the group, which we do know cycles every 30 seconds. Another important ability to look at here is the Crushing Grip that goes out on the tank, also on a 30-second timer. Huge amount of sustained spike damage, magic damage, might I add, on the tank right now. There is no Purgatory available for them either, but they will have access likely to their Vampiric Blood every single rotation because they just have that amount of haste at this 970 gear level, assuming they equipped and equipped into it rather. We do see the Crushing Grip on Skylark, no problem, doesn't even dip in any form of dangerous territory, because also on top of it, he has access to the anti-magic shell for every other too.
Yeah, and that's what you really want to see is you're seeing how much runic power is being banked up by Skylark to make sure every single time he's going to be able to have those resources available to him, to be able to deal with the breath. And there still is quite a bit of large ticking damage that will come out from, or large melee attacks that are coming out from the boss. But you are also seeing Lust going up here for Gulch Trotters to more easily help them kind of burn down Oakheart here. So it looks like they are sticking to their plan to make sure they're going to get their Lust there by Xavius.
Yeah, it makes sense here. A lot of this is the reason why they popped their Bloodlust early in the dungeon, to make sure that they get 3 of them out of the dungeon. Something that Free Marcy might not really have access to when they get to Oakheart, and they'll have to save it for either Dresseron or Shade of Xavius. So, perhaps a bit of an advantage in terms of strategy here in favor of Gulch Trotters, Jack.
It does look like there might be that extra advantage. We've seen, especially with like Maw of Souls, we were able to kind of compare, the strategies of like going for those two Lust timings or just going for one that's going to be perfect timing for them. But when you're in a Tyrannical setting and you're able to get it for, two very chunky and very deadly bosses that are very annoying to deal with as you're getting later into the instance, it really makes a lot of sense and while there is a lot more pressure to be getting Gladalis down cleanly, Gulch Trotters already did that, right? And so they're sitting in a very strong position going forward, moving on to Dresseron after Oakheart here.
Yeah, Free Marcy just now moving up to that patrol, which then leads to the Dwellers, which then leads to Oakheart. But for Gulch Trotters, Oakheart already at 1/3 health remaining. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that they're pretty safely going to kill the rest of this boss. It's going to topple over, and they're going to work their way over to Dresseron. But there have been a few close calls with that AoE Stomp. We've seen Techniques drop to about 10% health. We've seen Shave drop pretty low as well a couple of the times. But it seems to be well calculated and within their grasp to just say, hey, look, as long as everyone's topped off for that Stomp, we should be pretty safe. There's no external damage coming in. We're cleaving down those roots as soon as they come up. Wouldn't be shocked if some of the players, especially for the bosses in this dungeon, are also wearing something like Pritus.
Yeah, and you might actually see, having Shape maybe going off to one of the sides there, standing next to Dag to be able to kind of take better advantage of the Devotion Aura that will just have the passive effect, because it is 20% damage reduction split between any players within about 10 yards of them. So at that point, if you're just standing off onto the far right foot while everybody else is going to be on the left side, you're offering about 10% damage reduction, which could be just enough to make sure they're staying in that safe position there. And as you're going into it, when you're seeing people dropping down to just 10 or 11%, that can definitely make a world of difference.
And Oakhart is now going down, Jack, and of course Yelling Timber on the way down. They will move over to the GUIs, and this Blood-Tainted Fury that we mentioned in the last series as well is a bit of a mob that could be a pretty significant time dump if not dealt with properly. When it dies, it will split into 4 lesser elementals. You want to make sure that you don't deal with those at all. You can run away before they actually land on the ground in form, and thus you don't proximity aggro them. The reason you don't want to deal with them is not only can you accidentally miss an interrupt for one of their Metamorphosis cast, and it will retransform into one of these larger Furies, but also they just don't give any percent. It's just complete waste of time. You see the players getting the stun and the CC on it as they run away immediately and make sure that they don't aggro any of those remaining ones. There is an orb that spawned there, an explosive orb, but they opt not to deal with it. It's not going to kill anyone. Whenever ends at max HP, not aggroed anything.
Yeah, and if you're able to kind of run away quick enough, there is quite a range to explosive, but if they're able to, already running away from it at that point, they're able to continue on and deal with the last of the GUIs here and a huge amount of explosives. So great team effort to make sure they're getting all of those in together and able to deal with them very rapidly here. And you might be seeing, the roots coming out onto the other Tainted Fury that was going out there, as Gulch Trotters is going to be dealing with the last of these little whelps and GUIs.
They do move over and accidentally tag an extra whelp, unfortunately, on the side. Just a bit of time lost there, but we've already had the root come in on that second patrolling Blood-Tainted Fury. No problem for them. They do have kind of free reign to deal with the whelp link here. Dag does go down, unfortunately, so they do have a death there. They have 2 battle reses on the board. No point using it right now. It's just 1 small whelpling, not a huge threat to the group. They're going to get the res up on Dag right after this, as they're doing so now, and they're going to get ready to pull Dressround. Now, Dressround, Jack, is one of the bosses we talked about as being, ironically, actually 3 of the 4 bosses in here are really quite dangerous on Tyrannical, but this one just has a lot of attention needed to be paid by the healer in form of AoE healing from both the cave-in mechanic that players will need to bait away from the boss, but also the winds.
Yeah, and the winds really cause most of the problems, especially from a Holy Paladin's perspective here, because you are pretty limited in your instant cast abilities. You're able to have your shock, you're able to have your Light of Dawn coming out there. You're still able to have the larger healing coming out from Beacon of Virtue on the entire group here. When you're trying to get the flash heal casts off to be able to make sure everyone is staying topped off, you're also sacrificing mobility, especially when you're in that knockback phase. So a lot of times it will come down to just strong timing out of Beacon of Virtue. You're seeing it going down just about halfway through the knockback coming out here. At this point, you really want to make sure you're able to actually still have Beacon of Virtue duration for when this cave-in comes in, so you're more easily able to get everybody else kind of topped off here and save a lot of your extra cast. That way you can continue contributing to more boss damage here.
Yeah, and it's really important, of course, to bait that cave-in away, as we mentioned, because you don't want to take up the real estate under the boss and force a displacement on the players, because the closer you are to the dead center of the boss's hitbox when these winds come out, the less speed you will get pushed away from by the boss. So you want to make sure you're not getting knocked into any extra eggs on the side, except for the tank actively pulling them to increase some of that single target damage going out on the boss. Technique's getting so low there, a lot of them. That cave-in cast does a huge amount of damage, so if they're not topped off well after one of those wind pushbacks, it could spell trouble for them. Fortunately, they are able to cycle consumption in for every other wind pushback, as it is on a 30-second timer with that blood DK. Huge amount of whelps being pulled here as well. They got to keep an eye out for those explosives too.
And you're also seeing the Purgatory instantly getting procced there. The duration is now just running off, so when you have all of those whelps going out, and while you're able to heal yourself for a ton with consumption up and the extra cleave damage, but Skylark really has to watch himself, because at this point, when he has so many of them on top of him, if he's not able to actually survive a lot of this damage, as you're seeing he's starting to kite things out, even as he's pulling even more whelps on top of him, he really has to be careful here.
And whelp, what can I say? They do pull some extra ones that are getting some extra damage. Now, this is particularly the dangerous part with his survival right now, because, you're getting a lot of pushback on Dag in the meantime. It's a bit tough to heal up the tank. All of the remaining members as well getting a ton of damage in on them, especially if they don't have the support from the consumption. Chompy dipping quite low again as that cave-in comes in. But Skylar not having too much trouble surviving. As scary as the yo-yoing health seems, with that amount of damage intake, with the way that Death Strike functions as a mechanic, healing you for more based on the amount of damage you've taken in the past few seconds, he's managing to basically almost essentially lay on hands, heal himself with heavy Death Strike, but he could be caught off guard on one or two of the globals that he's doing, and he will drop quite quickly, not having that extra safety net of the Purgatory.
Yeah, and that's why you see a lot of times he is just trying to bank out as much of the runic power as possible here to ensure that he never kind of gets caught into that situation. So as long as he's able to, continuously having all of these adds in to help kind of boost up the single target damage here for Chompy, I think that's one of the things you always have to watch out for. Is it can be an extremely powerful move, especially if you're getting huge healing on everybody as they're cleaving during a knockback or right after a cave-in. But if it definitely puts the tank in danger, so really strong play here by Skylark to make sure he's keeping himself topped off.
And I mean, huge numbers on the board for Chompy especially, but a lot of that damage, of course, is just Cleave. Some of that wealth damage, Cleave damage. Free Marcy, we didn't forget about them, of course, half down to Oakheart. Did use their Bloodlust on Oakheart because it's just such a long boss duration that you chew through, and Free Marcy is now just pulled Dressron. Both teams having a similar death toll, with Gulch Trotters, of course, having an extra 5 seconds, but they're well ahead beyond that 5-second mark above Free Marcy, which is just now starting on Dressron. We see Gulch Trotters move in here, immediately pull the two caster packs together, and somebody tags the Bloodseekers, which of course are melee mobs, so they immediately filter in on top of the tank, able to blood boil and grab aggro on everything, and as long as they keep everything silenced and finish those explosives off, should be a pretty clean pull here, after which likely Jack will probably see that Invis pod being busted out.
That's right, and as you're seeing, they're kind of rotating through their Arcane Torrents here. First they started off with that Solar Beam here, just having such a long duration of the silences available to them. Always very important, having your tank and Skylark just being able to continuously be kiting back here, because those Bloodseekers do put up quite a nasty dot that stacks very quickly here. So Dag doing an excellent job to make sure he's kind of getting those taken off, and of course watching out for the curses that are coming out from some of those summoner casters, making sure you're able to use Hand of Freedom to be able to remove it, because of course the Paladin's not able to remove the curse, but since the curse is not able to dispel the curse, but since the curse is a slow, on top of that, you're able to actually get rid of it with a Hand of Freedom.
Gulch Trotters still invising rather through that last pack, a nasty pack particularly, that we discussed earlier. Don't have to deal with any more orbs from them or any messiness coming up, but now the big boys coming in here, Shade of Xaviers in a Tyrannical setting on 24, has a ton of one-shot mechanics, as we've mentioned in some prior series. That Nightmare Bolt is a force to be reckoned with. If Chompy gets, we've seen Chompy actually dip sub 10% every time, even successfully going into bear form when those Nightmare Bolts are cast. Paranoia, players want to move away. We do have that Feed on the Weak, which is a channel on a player, could be on the tank. You always actually want to see it on the tank because it helps the healer a lot, but it is a huge channel dot that the healer will kind of have to burst through. And finally, we do have that 50% AoE nuke on the party, excuse me, Jack, and that's something that the healer has to be well prepared for.
Yeah, and a lot of times you will just see, holding on to Divine Shield to make sure you're able to survive that huge amount of damage going out. But at that other point, you always have to make sure you're able to quickly respond and react to the damage that's going to be going out here. So just constant Flashio cast to be able to keep Chompy up. He does shift into bear form using his Frenzy Regen to make sure he's keeping himself alive here, and it can be so dangerous. He's actually using Hand of Sacrifice, very move there by Dag to be making sure he's able to kind of start splitting up a little bit of the damage that Chompy is taking over that duration. And it also, because it's off the global cooldown, you're able to get that quicker reaction to the damage there, where you're able to get the Hand of Freedom used, or sorry, Hand of Sacrifice used, and quickly respond to it. You might want to see the Lay on Hands coming out of here for Chompy, just to be able to keep him top 9%, very low there. So
double dips to 9%. They're really trusting his teammate with the healing and staying alive in that bear form, getting some of those ticks of that frenzied regen. Dag doing well, of course, to move to his group members with that pacification aura from the Nightmare Bolt. 60% on Shade of Xaviers. We're going to have access to Bloodlust right about now on Gulch Trotters. Going to prop it pretty much immediately. Come on, guys.
You might see if they wait till 50% in case anybody goes down from this.
Sure.
There might be some kind of communication to see, like, oh, if I don't actually have something, they do have those 3 battle reses available. Say, hey, we're just going to instantly get you up. Then we'll have full lust for everybody.
Totally possible. They might also just be waiting for some of their cooldowns to line up. So we'll see them pop there. I'm sure, hopefully, at this point, they know that they do have it available. Techmon getting healed well there through that Feed on the Weak dot. Here comes the huge explosion that we're talking about.
Okay.
And Chompy goes down. We see the Bloodlust popped immediately as that explosion kind of synchronizes with the 50% mark on the boss. Now, there is a bit of RNG here. If any of those Swirlies do end up connecting with the boss's hitbox, of course, players want to avoid that. It damages them, but the boss will gain a 5% damage buff, which I believe lasts 10 seconds, and it can stack. There's a reason, as we mentioned in prior series, that the boss is being tanked on the side of the room. You effectively cut 180 degrees of his hitbox off from the room to really minimize the impact that the boss, the chance rather, that the boss gets some of the buffs. And we do have a huge nuke go in on Shape DH from that Nightmare Bolt, which we said has one-shot potential. Finishes him off. Luckily, they have access to 3 battle reses, get him up immediately. Free Marcy still struggling to work through the Shady of Xavius log as they move over.
Yeah, and at that point, they had almost all of Bloodlust consumed consumed, and the Shape didn't really miss too much of it. So I really like that timing there for the Bloodlust, because at this point they are at 22%. They got to about 25%. They're burning about a quarter of his boss's health over the duration of Lust here. And at this point, sitting in such a strong position. Dag's been doing an excellent job being able to quickly respond, and he's kind of cycling through his cooldowns there. You're seeing, he was popped Wings with his Lust to make sure that he was able to dish out as much damage as possible, but you still had Wings up for, of course, that defeat on the week that went out. Now when you're able to kind of rotate through Holy Avenger, Tears Deliverance there, making sure you're able to kind of quickly respond to the damage that's going to come out from Feet on the Week. That way it's going to be putting less and less pressure on you. You're seeing huge damage going out onto Dag here, but he does have a very large absorb and taking care of it very easily. There, but it always is very scary, the amount of damage that it does pump out onto those players. But Gulch Trotters has just played it so cleanly here. 2% left.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that in the last series as well. On the forced map pick with DHT, and there's no reason after this performance, no shade of a doubt in my mind as to why they really chose this dungeon. Just dominant performance coming out of them, and they win their map pick and tie the series at 1 apiece. And Rich, is like we were saying earlier, really no shock in this series that it goes down to a game 3.
I think it's very deserving. It's fitting for this series. The two best teams in APAC facing off, and we really haven't seen too many 2-0s going down today for the most part. And it's with great pleasure that I get to say, my God, we're going to a game 3. I can't see now for the rest of the series, but I do think that it is fitting. These are two really strong teams. The question is, how are they going to compete globally? We know that they are both already going to be going there. But now, who will take that better seeding? Who will take that prize pool? What do you think, Jack, will be that map pick coming in for the team that was able to take that first map and are reigning world champions?
I think at this point, I would be interested in seeing another Court of Stars coming out here. Just be able to see, how cleanly the teams have been able to play. You got to keep those off, man. Just be able to see, how cleanly a lot of these teams can play. But it also, even though you're losing out on, of course, the extra little benefits that, usually you'll have in the dungeon on live servers, I think in a lot of ways it is such a strong comfort pick here.
Sorry, you were saying.
It is such a strong comfort pick here for so many teams going into it, and you have that strong consistency out of them.
Definitely, we were listening to you, 100%. Salute, what do you think?
What was the question? No, I'm just kidding. I mean, we guessed it wrong last dungeon. I kind of was I was kind of in favor of the whole, loser pick third map. They have the advantage going in, but we did see some kind of inconsistencies in performance coming out of Free Pumps, so it could have gone either way. It didn't work in their favor, but Free Marcie has just been such a force to reckon with this entire tournament. We've heard, Rob go on about they're just a buzzsaw. You don't want to get fed in the buzzsaw, so I'm going to have to go with Free Marcie on this one, but we'll see.
They do have that advantage with the pick, right? And I think one of the things is they didn't really have that at the beginning of the series. I don't think that they wanted to go to Seed of the Triumvirate. We saw that dungeon sit on both of these teams, but ultimately they are able to get that first win, which gives them the advantage here. Will that be enough for Free Marcie, or will Gulch Trotters trot straight to a victory here? We'll find out when we return. It will be the conclusion of the APAC MDI. Free Marcie versus the Gulch Trotters. Guys, one more dungeon for the entire day. It's been a pretty crazy day, honestly. It's cool how things ended up shaping up. We got to see every single team in NA. All 8 of them are still going to be standing. We are going to chop it down to just 2 tomorrow and crown a champion. But first, we got to crown a champion in APAC, and this is going to be the dungeon that decides it. My name is Rich, and on the desk, we got Sloot and Jack to cast this one. Obviously, Free Marcie does have that advantage, right? They are going to be able to select what that last dungeon is. Seats, the first one, nobody would have picked that, especially on this difficulty. It's pretty rough, let's be honest. So
and they already played it.
Being able to no, but I'm just saying, like, the fact that they had to go through that,
yes.
right? They managed to get that win, and it's kind of a double thing. They're able to obviously get a map win, but it's going to be that last pick for them as well. Gulch Trotters on their pick look phenomenal. Free Marcie, I'm curious what they actually do pick. We'll be finding out in just a second here, Jack, but based off of what we know from this team, is there anything that stands out to you?
Well, Free Marcie really has been the team, I think, in any of the regions besides China, right? Skyline D and Free Marcie really have been those 2 teams that have looked like the #1 seed, have looked like the pinnacle of course, their regions there. So I think in a lot of ways it has just been, you know, how cleanly they played across the board in general. Like we did see, like we were talking about with that seed of the Triumvirate, where they did have 17 deaths, but they were able to catch up. So it's an extremely disciplined team there that I don't think is really going to be prone to many stupid mistakes. My thought was Court of Stars, but I think you said you had what the map pick was going to be?
Oh, yeah. It is going to be an upper explosive. Production actually told me 6 times, and I just completely didn't hear it for some reason.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, you guys don't actually get to see what goes on behind the scenes, but I'm doing
yeah, we're
quite a lot. I'm doing quite a lot. Trust me, believe in me. But it is going to be an upper Karazhan to kind of determine it all. And before we actually talk about this dungeon, I want to talk about something that Jack kind of brought up in what he was just saying. And that is the fact that when we look at these top 2 teams from each region, how do you think they all really do compare to each other? I feel like it is just very, very, very intense competition between those top teams, regardless of region.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I can say with absolute certainty is that we're going to have a phenomenal global LAN. I mean, just the level of skill, the teams, the preparation going into that is going to be crazy. And it's not just, you know, you're getting a good top 2 from each region when in all of the regions so far, well beyond the top 2 have just had a crazy amount of teams and crazy competition going on. So it's going to be nuts.
All right, well, it's time to return to Karazhan one final time for the evening. It is going to be a large amount of money on the line and that seeding for that global LAN. Let's see who comes out on top for the APAC region.
Hi, Jack.
Hi, Ted. How's it going, man?
I think you can hand this one.
Interestingly enough, we're having Free Marcie here playing for that final game in the grand finals on that upper Karazhan.
You know, I'm really not shocked to see this map pick for them. We didn't get to comment it pre-match, but they were really strong in terms of their single target damage going out in the first dungeon. A lot of the kind of ground they managed to catch up in that seat of the Triumvirate was single target damage, not to mention the amount of damage that came out on Lure. Remember where they ended up after that burst, 200%? It was like a 40% difference between the boss. Both teams skipping a lot of the spirits coming up, getting the MC on them, pulling, of course, the robots here on the side to the side of the stairs that we often see teams do, because as soon as they start to cast a lot of that sparking void zone on the ground, players can just avoid it by sitting on the side of the steps and be completely safe.
Yeah, and you see a lot of times they're just making sure they're going off to the edge here to make sure they're able to just dodge through everything. And, you know, it really does offer such a greater opportunity for the extra cleave damage here, and you're having everything kind of coming in, compiling in together for, of course, the explosive orbs that you have to be dealing with. And then at that point, raging really just is a total non-issue here as you're just taking this down, and you're having to deal with the Forlorn Spirit, the Gulch Trotters that just released there.
Unfortunately, Retrofresh did not compute there and managed to actually pull up a death. They did burn their battle res, Free Marcie did there, so already a bit of a disadvantage. The teams are full strength again, but as they lead up to this nullifier, that will cast that go figure.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right? On the teams, they will kind of head around the corner. They are wanting to stay around the corner of this room for 2 reasons. One is, of course, any orbs that spawn will be line of sight and they'll be able to just freely explode. They don't have to deal with them. But the other one is that nullified debuff or spirit that gets cast always spawns in the exact same spot in this room. Players that collect it will receive 100% damage increase buff for 30 seconds, which is why you're seeing such a mass trash pull come out of both teams, because once one of the DPS hopefully gets that buff, that's just going to be absolutely melting those ads.
Yeah, and that's what you want to see, is being able to, you know, consistently getting that nullification buff and being able to pull in destroy all the trash as rapidly as possible here. Always important to note that you can line of sight the nullifier. If you're line of sighted to it, it will not actually affect you. So a lot of times when you're starting to see that cast coming up very quickly, it's always important as a healer. Make sure you're line of sighting it. Make sure you're staying away from it because, of course, in case somebody is going to be dropping low, you want to be able to heal and not have to worry about being pacified. But on the other hand, it's so much more beneficial for the DPSers in your group to actually have that huge damage buff here. So it's way more important for them to have it than to you, and also seeing if you can actually carry it over into the Curator for at least some of the duration.
So Free Marcy now moving into the room here with Gulch Trotters as well. Both teams in a very similar trash percentage. Of course, only 2% separating them. Not really too much trash they could have skipped except for some of the spirits at the start. Gulch Trotters killing one extra spirit. Doing well to stack up here for that static shock on the ground, wanting to bait it as it does spawn on players. Moving one unit to the left or right, depending on which way you want to go. Actually, Free Marcy going back, so they just completely threw a wrench at me right now. But, you know, if you could dodge a wrench, you could dodge a ball as well. And in this case, they do dodge. The electric ball is going down. Now, there's a couple of advantages here. One of the big ones being that these kind of static energies that spawn, the extra mobs that spawn do a lot of arcing damage to the players, but will also jump to nearby players. So if everyone's stacked together, there's a bit of extra damage from them, but their melee are effectively able to cleave them down as well.
Yeah, I actually was kind of confused by the early positioning there by Gulch Trotters, but I actually really love what they're doing right now. They actually had the first two pools spawning up at the top, you know, near the exit, of course. Then they're kind of bringing everything back around here and making this nice pocket, of course, for their DPSers here. They're getting a lust early here to be able to start getting that duration, getting the resources built up, of course, when they will be dealing with that evocation phase, just be able to dump as much damage as possible here. And that's always so important when you're running with these double melee compositions to ensure that no matter what, you're going to be having a nice area for the melee to be able to stand in. That's not going to be able, you know, too restricted to where they will be able to go to. And while there is a very large hitbox to it, a lot of times, you know, these sparking areas can just be so restrictive here. So I love the pocket that Gulch Trotters built.
Absolutely right, Jack. Both teams dumping hard on Curator during his evocation phase here. 100% increased damage taken for both of the teams right now, and both of them get out of the phase at around the same time, as there was not too much difference between their pulls. We don't see the Bloodlust being used for Free Marcy, whereas we saw it for Gulch Trotters here. Not really sure what they're holding onto it for. Perhaps it'll be for the second evocation phase that they get with. We'll have to see what they do, but you know, even though they didn't use that Bloodlust, they're actually ahead of Gulch Trotters now by a few percent, because we know the burst potential of this team in terms of increased damage done on the boss. We saw it in Seat, and they take advantage of it here with those two monks as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it's incredible how Free Marcy has been able to have such strong single target damage. They didn't even bother using Bloodlust here, and they're just still consistently pulling ahead of the other team, about 4 or 5% ahead at this point here. They're doing a fantastic job, and this also lends to what you were talking about, where Free Marcy has such strong single target damage here, and that's what you want to be able to have going into an instance that is Tyrannical and is mainly focused on those bosses.
Yeah, it really plays to their strengths, and I mean, mechanically, especially on this robot boss, they're doing absolutely fantastic. Both teams dragging Curator slowly to the exit. Here comes the second evocation phase for Gulch Trotters. Dealing with that orb on the side does well by the Blood DK. Free Marcy in just a moment. We'll be seeing them too using, getting that second evocate. Bit of an unfortunate spawn there at the very end with the static, but this hitbox is so huge that there's no problem for the melee to get in position. At this point, it's quite clear that they will be saving their Bloodlust for Shade of Medivh, more than likely, and trying to perhaps even burn him down before they have to deal with too many of those mechanics. I don't think they'll be able to really skip, especially on a 24 Tyrannical, the Flame Wreath phase that they'll go through, but that's likely what they're saving it for.
Well, it's interesting to see the kind of difference in strategies here, where Gulch Trotters did end up using their Bloodlust and only got out of the evocate phase at 12%, and they're on the entire other side of the room here. They're where they actually walked into.
And they have a death.
And they have a death. And Free Marcy, on the other hand, they actually have another death coming in. And Free Marcy, on the other hand, position themselves. They're right at the door. They're ready to leave the second that the boss goes down, and they killed it in the second evocate without Bloodlust here.
I mean, Techniques just goes down, gets rezzed, and goes down right away again. So a lot of damage coming in on that poor Windwalker. Boss still at 3%, which is a ton of health to deal with in the Tyrannical setting, but they should be able to down the remaining percent, no problem. Free Marcy has now moved over to this Flamebringer. And, you know, teams often opt to skip this, but, I mean, they just pull out. I don't actually really think they have a very effective way to skip it. 1% left on the boss. Luckily, the DK manages to finish it off in a solid fashion, but that's another 4 deaths on the board for Gulch Trotters, unfortunately.
Yeah, and they thankfully we're actually able to make sure they're getting that boss down, and the checkpoint does, of course, put them to head, so there's not too far back in terms of the backtracking that they have to be dealing with here. But you're seeing Free Marcy here posturing themselves, getting ready to deal with Medivh here. They have a ton of kicks at their disposal, and they also have a ton of skips available to them, but you are seeing a very early Purgatory there coming out by Wrath.
Yeah, those arcane missiles are lethal. I mean, they do a lot of damage. We're Tyrannical 24 right now. Those are no joke. So you want to have a lot of defensives popped, especially if you're trying to eat them to the face in order to save a lot of those kick cooldowns and interrupt cooldowns for the players. Wanted to get all of those frostbites interrupted, some of the Inferno Blasts interrupted, especially when we see that Flame Wreath phase come up. But we do know, Jack, that the first phase that we're going to hit is the Guardian phase with a lot of those arcane birds on the side. They're probably going to be a bit of splash damage, of course. You're going to be multi-dotting away from the Warlock, but you're likely going to want to kill one of those birds as quickly as possible while the Warlock multi-dots, because the damage does get out of hand pretty quickly.
Yeah, and you're seeing, you know, being able to allow the Warlock to multi-dot here, being able to actually just have extremely strong cleave damage will go a long way. And at this point, they've burned down the first image, and they're already starting to work onto the second one. And I like what they're able to do here. They're kind of parking the DK out on, you know, that middle Guardian's image that was there. He's able to start doing the damage as the monks are able to just completely obliterate that first one going out. And at this point, the Warlock's just able to get good cleave damage out on everything. It's about 75% on that last Guardian image and just going down so rapidly here. And taking that extra time, because even though it is on Tyrannical, the birds are actually buffed by Fortified here, so the damage going out into the party here is not too heavy that they have to deal with, but going into the second mechanic from the Deve, Flame Wreath will be extremely, extremely deadly.
And the Windwalkers flying between those birds, just nuking them down quickly. They're now back into the regular phase. They did use their Bloodlust at the beginning of the pool, as we alluded to earlier. That's clearly what they were saving it for. But even with that amount of damage coming out, they will definitely have to deal with that Flame Wreath. Hopefully for them, one of them goes on the Warlock. Likely it will. Warlock very survivable. The other one, they'll have to be careful with where it spawns in the melee area. Warlock doing well there to use the portal over, avoiding that Inferno Blast dot. That can be quite dangerous. And here, indeed, we see the Flame Wreaths come up. One on the Warlock and one on one of the Windwalkers. Windwalker definitely has to be paid very close attention to. If one of those Flame Wreaths goes off, either by one of the players dying or by somebody, including the player within the circle, crossing the border of that circle, it will also explode and pretty much finish off the entire group. A bit of an unfortunate situation as we see unfold with Gulch Trotters too, but this time it's actually the Guardian phase with some explosives going off, and it's an absolute nightmare for Gulch Trotters right now.
Yeah, it's kind of scary to see, especially when you're thinking that that phase is going to be a lot easier to actually deal with than most of them. So right there, they weren't able to actually deal with the explosives and the Guardian's images at this exact same time here. So I was kind of looking at, you know, the one I would be looking most at would be Chompy and, of course, Skylark, to be able to kind of more easily deal with a lot of those explosives and at least just be able to have the communication, being able to kind of get those call-outs for what actually would be going on to it. But you're seeing Free Marcy there, 1% left, taking down Medivh here, and such a clean run throughout this instance so far here. And this is really what you want to be seeing out of the counter pick here.
And down the rabbit hole Free Marcy goes right now. We're going to have a bit of an RP session right now where Free Marcy won't really be doing anything except falling down this very psychedelic, hypnotic almost gap down into the rest of the dungeon area. Gulch Trotters getting another pull in on Shade of Medivh on the left side of the screen, hoping to get it right this time. Fortunately for them, you know, they didn't save their Bloodlust for this boss, so they didn't, you know, pull the boss with Bloodlust and then waste the entirety of Bloodlust, but a lot of time wasted with those 5 deaths, 25 seconds on the board, plus the entire wipe and needing to run back. So Gulch Trotters certainly have their work cut out for them, as we're seeing Free Marcy rocket into position on top of these books. Another good picture of me and you, Jack, here. There's just so many. I mean, there's so much literature about us in these library in Upper Karazhan.
Well, it's kind of surprising, especially with how young the MDI is, you know, just how well they're able to get these books so quickly published. It's amazing.
Yeah, and
what can happen in the world.
I had so much hair in that picture too. What happened there as well? Free Marcy now plummeting to the bottom of the book stack, hugging the right side of the area, and will soon be pulling the third boss of the dungeon, the Mana Devourer. Now, teams typically pull this boss to the corner in order to, of course, funnel a lot of those mana orbs that are trying to make their way back to the boss. If the boss reaches 100% energy, it will explode and pretty much finish off everyone in the group, except for anybody who pre-pops an immunity, or likely the tank with some kind of CDs popped. So, you know, players often pre-immune, such as an AMS or a bubble or a frost, excuse me, an ice block rather, not frost block, an ice block, but they only have one set of immunities here in terms of AMS, and that can only really be popped every other orb round. So players are going to have to work to collect some of those orbs, get that really heavy dot, Jack, that you do know as a healer is quite dangerous, and dump it off in that whirlwind.
Yeah, the scary thing is about having to go into that whirlwind is while the dot does deal quite heavy damage, it's going to be going out here, so does the whirlwind there. And you're going to be having these gigantic hits going out onto them. So I'm wondering how much pressure they're really going to be putting onto Wrath to be able to survive this, if he's going to be running with as many defensive legendaries and trinkets as possible or something like that to be able to run with it. I mean, I could see Zeraze, for example, just being able to grab one, getting into bear form, barking himself, being able to kind of release one, frenzy regen, things like that. But it really does stack up so rapid. Actually, he is in Feral Affinity, so he doesn't have Frenzy Regen there. So it is so, but it's so rapidly, you know, chunking people down if you're not able to kind of deal with it here. So, I mean, I might be seeing like maybe like the Warlock being able to take one here, but I'm very interested in seeing going forward how they're going to be able to do this, and maybe if they're just going to have, you know, some people getting sacrificed in the process.
Yeah, we're seeing 7 stacks go up on Wrath right now as he's getting 5% damage per stack, but he immediately runs over into the tornado, pops a bunch of CDs, likely has Icebound Fortitude up, of course, Vamp Blood, some AMS to help. No, actually, no, AMS is not available, but Vamp Blood, IBF, any kind of DR they can get their hands on, dumps already most of the stacks, huge damage coming in, luckily manages to survive. I mean, that's huge. Now, the advantage of the corner here is not only that it funnels orbs from the sides into the boss, cuts that 360-degree angle down to 90, but it also forces a ton of orbs to spawn directly on top of the boss's hitbox, right in the middle there. So the kind of the trick here is that whoever's absorbing the orbs stands in the middle of the hitbox and jumps up and down to absorb the orbs before they touch the ground and are absorbed by the boss, which is what the DK did both of the times there, one with AMS, one without, and that's why he was able to accumulate so many stacks so quickly. Yeah,
and even if he is, you know, soaking up so many with AMS, you are seeing just taking a huge amount of damage. You are seeing Purgatory popped and going out onto him, so it's so dangerous to see. You're also seeing on the side of Gulch Trotters here where Deve has not fallen. They're having to deal with the second Guardians phase here, taking such a long time to be able to catch up here. So at this point for Free Marcy, they just need to make sure that they're, you know, maybe even sacrificing someone to ensure that they're not going to be letting the Mana Devourer go to full energy here. You're seeing a lot of people picking up some extra stacks and Mana Devourer going down.
They actually did essentially sacrifice someone. Wrath did fall there while you were keeping an eye on Free Marcy, so they did use their battle res, unfortunately. It did clean up the Purgatory as a result, a bit of silver lining there, but they don't have that battle res accessible to them. Here now we will be pulling most of the Mana Worms. Sometimes players like to get 6 followed by the remaining 9 in the room, Jack.
Nice.
Yes, followed by the remaining 9 in the room, but the danger here pulling all 15 together is of course the spawn of these explosives. Quite dangerous for some of the teams, especially in this 24 setting. You want to make sure you babysit them a lot, and at this point I'm sure Free Marcy know that they have a pretty good lead over Gulch Trotters, so there's no point on risking anything too much and having a wipe.
Yeah, and it can be so dangerous when you are pulling all of these, all the little whelpings, all the Mana Worms in together here, because not only do you have to deal with, of course, you know, all the orbs that are coming in, dealing a lot of damage, having all the explosive orbs coming in very rapidly here, but also when, you know, the Mana Worms do enrage, they can have a huge amount of damage, even when you're only getting like 1 or 2 of those orbs coming in there. So it's very good to see them actually just running them down into this hallway here, and if need be, they can actually just start kiting it down, unless they just completely obliterate all of them here.
Yeah, I mean, probably that, but this should be, you know, this kind of filtering into the hall helps with 2 things. One is any orbs that spawn outside you can easily line of sight, but also the orbs that are funneled to the Mana Worms, similar to the boss that we just saw. In fact, they are the exact same as the boss we just saw, but now that the players have grown up, the Mana Worms are smaller, and as a result, trash mobs. You can filter those in, bottleneck them through the doorway, and absorb a lot of those orbs, increasing your damage by, I believe, 10% per stack, something like that. They do get the rest of the worms down and now running over to the Bridge of Doom leading up to the chess event. Now, they have, I believe the chess event is 7% trash, if I'm not mistaken. That'll leave them to 96, according to my math here on this napkin right now. Meaning they have just a bit of trash left at the end of it, which likely they will pull a couple of those bats after they kill the chess event, because there's a pretty substantial amount of RP going on before you have access to Visit Doom, the final boss.
Yeah, and a lot of times, you know, when you're able to just have your healer run ahead, being able to deal with, of course, all the RP there, while the rest of the group is able to deal with the bats, you know, there's not a lot of maintenance required. You're just taunting the bats down, gripping the bats down, and being able to deal with it here. But at this point for Free Marcy, they do need to make sure they're going to be able to jump onto these knights as quickly as possible here. Usually you'll see, you know, teams just being able to focus down the knights that are near by the boss. Kind of unlucky to see that, you know, one of the other knights kind of splitting off from that kind of quick and easy cleave range there, so they might end up actually focusing onto something else if they do need it. And at a 24 level, they probably will need to, because at this point, they're getting into the exposed phase. They're able to start burning the king down as quickly as possible here, and you might just see some multi-dotting from the Warlock to be able to funnel in some more damage.
But we do know, of course, if the king doesn't reach that 30% threshold, he will reapply eventually his immunity shield, so that you're absolutely right, Jack. We'll probably need to kill one more thing, the knight being usually one of the best targets as is the lowest health, but the king's actually dropping quite quickly here. Unfortunately, does get the shield back up. They do turn and burn on the knight right away, making sure to reapply that stun debuff on the king, which will easily drop him below 30% in the next cycle. Gulch Trotters on the left side of the screen has now pulled Mana Devourer, the third boss of the dungeon, and used their second Bloodlust, doing a similar strat, pulling him to the corner and using the immunities that they have available to them, which is more because they do have the bubble available, likely from the Holy Paladin as well. So it should be a bit easier for them to clean up those orbs with less risky 7 to 9 stacks yo-yoing the tank's health.
Yeah, and at that point, you know, they will be able to rotate through, of course, the Blood Decay, probably the Paladin's Bubble, then, of course, taking advantage, of course, of another AMS. But you are seeing the Paladin going down very, very rapidly here with Dag. And what I was going to be talking about is when you start getting into that fourth, you know, if you do have it because you do have Bloodlust, hopefully they will not have to deal with the fourth of the expelled mana coming out there. But if they do have to be in that situation, you're able to have like Netherwalk from the Demon Hunter, or you'll be able to have just, you know, sacrifice one of the other DPS or sacrifice maybe the healer to be able to soak up everything to kind of more easily deal with it there. So it can be very, very scary to watch out for as they're kind of getting a little bit later into this, but thankfully they haven't lost any DPS during that Bloodlust.
As we guessed earlier, Free Marcy does move outside, and they're going to see who's up to bat right now. They pull the 2 bats down, finish them off, and now you see Zerace here has already kind of moved up, started all of that RP leading up to Vizzadoom, and the rest of the team is now running over. They should make it back in time by about the time this door opens. We do see Medivh finally move up, finishing his RP. Door opens, and the team has perfectly returned. Excellent timing by them, and we're now starting on the last boss, Vizzadoom, which, you know, this was not really the most dangerous boss when this dungeon came out, but eventually they kind of buffed some of his abilities, bolstered them, added some extra damage, changed the mechanics slightly, and this is really a force to be reckoned with. Things can get out of hand pretty quickly, especially in the second and third ship, which of course he transitions to at 66 and 33% respectively.
Yeah, and it really shows how the scariest parts of Tyrannical is not necessarily the additional damage, but it really is the additional HP going into this. So when you're in like a Fortified phase, for example, well, let me just start getting into this. We are seeing the Void Orbs that are spawning out, of course, from the Warlock there in Airy. You know, it's very important. At this first platform here, you will have one debuff going out onto a player. I mean, make sure that either whenever they're dispelled or when the effect just fades off, because the effect, well, the debuff will actually put out some very heavy ticking damage, but it will spawn a bunch of Void Orbs going onto the first ship. They will have 2 orbs on each player, and then, of course, they'll go into 3 when they're going to that final one. So it's very important to be able to kind of deal with that ticking damage, but also making sure that people are dodging orbs, they're not running or strafing around when those, of course, go off.
So Free Marcy moving on to the next ship right now. We'll have to see which one of the players will rush over to stop the boss's cast here. My pick will be that it'll be one of the Windwalker monks, as they, you know, have access to just such huge mobility here. We do have to dip in on the sides of the ship to make sure that the frontal doesn't clip them. It does punt you back and deal a substantial amount of damage with that disintegrate. You know, not so dangerous here at the very start, but now that you have that kind of 360-degree access to Vizzadoom, if you do get clipped by that disintegrate, you are off the platform and gone for the rest of the fight. So really do or die here for the players.
Yeah, no life grip available for any priest healers to be able to help save them here.
Yuck.
So it's very important to make sure that, of course, they're going to be watching out for this. At this time, at the second platform, you know, it is interesting to see if teams are going to opt to use Lust or if they're going to opt to kind of skip it and wait for that final platform. On Tyrannical, of course, they're just sitting on it, waiting for the final platform there because they're not going to be able to, of course, skip that Void Orb phase at all. They're not going to be able to push him to that 33% to be able to get him to transition to the final ship here. So much better to be able to hold on to it in this Tyrannical and actually wait to be able to use it on Lust, of course, when you're having to deal with those extra Blade Lords.
So we see Gulch Trotters moving well, honestly, through Mana Devourer, now through the rest of the trash, through the Worms. They're just starting on the chess event now, but they're just so far behind because of the wipes they had at the beginning of the dungeon, the struggles they had to. The Windwalker Monks dipping so low there. Fortunately, no deaths, even though Arrow dips below that 10% threshold to 7%. Demonic Portal going down again. Vizzadoom now progressing to the last platform. Here we will have, of course, that splashing Bat Guano go down on the players. Want to make sure you spread out just a bit. There's a lot of damage coming up, and they will be running down the platform here, picking up a lot of those Fel Lords, which will debuff the tank with increasing stacks of slow and a fire dot on top of it. But you do want to make sure, Jack, that you're interrupting the boss before he finishes this very long cast, else you're going to be met with a lot more resistance.
Yep, and at this point, they're just pulling everything up into Vizzadoom here. You always have to watch out as Bloodlust is going up here. Just watching the positioning of both of the monks here, making sure that they're not going to be standing on top of each other, because as the Guano that you did mention, it will have more of a splash effect, so you can have your melee dropping so low, so rapidly. So even though Zerace, of course, is in that feral affinity, he is taking an event where he's just standing back, getting some wrath casts off, making sure that he's not, adding any kind of extra splash or any damage, of course, to the rest of the group here. Bloodlust hasn't even faded yet. They're at 4% left on Vizzadoom here.
And I mean, it looks like Free Marcy is going to win this one.
Yes, indeed, Salute, as they are taking him down. Free Marcy, the #1 seed out of Asia Pacific, and they're here to show it.
And the Mungo's flying off the edge of the platform at the very end for showmanship.
That's called style points. But the big thing is we really do see Free Marcy, when they are on a map that they are prepared for,